Hey gentlemen, today we are going to analyze this video by Kate and Michelle. What's really behind the lack of good men? I don't know. Let's see.
Where are we meeting the men that don't suck? Where are we finding them?
Where are all the good men?
Where are all the good men at?
Where have all the good men gone?
Where are all the good men?
Where do I find the nice guy that wants
Oh god. This is the biggest red flag I've seen. Jesus Christ. They are far away from you, lady.
a simple, healthy relationship?
Where are the good men at? Where they at? How do I meet them? Where do I go?
Girls, where the fuck are you finding good men?
You say you want a good man, but ask yourself this. Would the man that you want the woman that you've become? 63% of men under the age of 30 are single, but that's not the whole story. In fact, 61% of men ages 18 to 29 say they want to be in a committed relationship, compared to only 50% of women. Yet everywhere we turn, there's a woman who's asking, why does it feel like there are no good men left? Maybe it's not that they're gone. Maybe they're just done with the rules of a rigged game. This video is for the women.
100% guys. That's why we built this whole thing, Nomadic Kingdom. There's so many great women out there around the world who haven't been brainwashed by this whole social media, rigged game. It's just insane. Like, it's insane. It's insane. I can say anything else.
Women who want a good man, who may not even be aware of the pitfalls of their own perceptions, beliefs, and behaviors that push good men away instead of pulling them in. And this video is for the men who are overburdened with the dialogue that their masculinity is somehow toxic, that we don't need them, when in fact, we do. This is for those of you who believe in commitment, love, and the depth of what is real over what just feels good right now. And to be transparent, this won't be an easy video.
100%. The main reason people are not getting into relationships anymore is because they don't know the amount of work and commitment it takes. It's the easygoing culture. Social media makes it easy. People get bored fast. Their dopamine receptors are completely trashed and fried by TikTok and all this crap. So basically, this is a neuro brain issue.
And I will be the first to admit that I don't have this all figured out. However, I do believe that there are fundamental flaws that have eroded the very fabric of relationships. And by the time you watch this video all the way to the end, you'll understand exactly how we got here and how the things that you believe are in your best interest may in fact be harming you. Now, without further ado, let's get into it. It started as a fight for rights, and it morphed into a war on roles. And now, it's a religion without redemption. This book is one that I recommend everybody reads. It reveals the esoteric and spiritual roots of feminism as rebellion.
Rachel Wilson, she is amazing. I read the book a couple of times. She goes so much into depth. Go read it, guys. I'm sure there's some audiobooks out there. Seriously, if you want to understand what went wrong, go watch that video.
And not just against men, but against nature and order itself. In the effort to see this from an alternative perspective to the narrative that you have probably been fed about feminism, I ask you to keep an open mind to what I'm about to share with you. I'm going to dive into each wave and show you how this movement has shifted drastically, potentially radically, over time. There are many narratives and beliefs held that feminism is either the best thing that has ever happened or the absolute worst. But unlike other waves that came, the first wave of feminism was focused on maintaining the order and nurture between men and women. The pioneers in this first wave, like Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Stanton, and Sojourner Truth,
Just, do like a deep dive on Susan B. Anthony. She was a monster. A total, complete monster.
framed their arguments not in terms of overthrowing the patriarchy or embracing the spiritual rebellion, but in terms of moral responsibility, justice, and civic duty. Many were abolitionists and temperance advocates.
That's the issue with political movements, the first wave usually, the spark is usually comes from a good place, like the feminist movement started like, there's, I'm not a feminist, of course, right? But there's balance between when you have a government involved with people and your rights. If, let's say, they have problems, like basically, you couldn't inherit property from your father, blah blah blah. That's not good in a society overall. But what I'm trying to say is that once we have a structure of political movements that may start a good place and they achieve their goal, now they have nowhere else to go. So they go after the next thing and the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And now we have like these weirdo feminists trying to overthrow patriarchy, closing your legs on the trains. The same thing happened with the LGBT community. The government got involved into the marriage industry. They got involved because they didn't want black and white women to marry, essentially interracial marriages, I guess. In so basically, the government like overstepped someone's boundary, and then it evolved into it basically became like a fucking torture for men, and that's why no sane man wants to marry someone in the West, knowing the absolute horrendous risks that it's going to take. Same thing happened with LGBT community. First started with marriages, which if you are paying taxes, I think it's fair. The moment the government got involved, they took out the church for marriages. So now, basically, the group, once they achieve their goal, getting marriage licenses, there's funding, there's fundraising money. So little by little, you know, they start eroding, and now we have these whole trans, issues stuff, this gender theory stuff. It's just there's no stop. There's the problem with political issues. Once they start, it's extremely hard to make them stop.
Campaigning against things like slavery, domestic abuse, and alcohol abuse, which were destroying families. And I personally see this as an era where women were fighting for family, for order, not against it. First wave feminists sought basic legal protection and recognition, the right to vote, property rights for married women, access to education, and legal recourse in abusive marriages. These demands were not about erasing sex-based differences, but about correcting clear injustices, ones that left women legally voiceless and financially trapped. These reforms aligned with natural law and biblical principles of justice, not oriented towards social upheaval. Now, I want to be clear that my positions are not to shove religion down your throat, nor are they to put me on some moral high ground. But it's also important to at least acknowledge that when we removed religion, we had to replace it with something. The erosion of Christianity didn't just impact our churches, it impacted cultural values that held our society together, and furthermore, opened the door in which this revolution could just walk right through. First wave feminists, for the most part, did not seek to erase the differences between men and women. They weren't trying to become men or mock men. Instead, they emphasized complementary roles, that women had a moral and nurturing influence that was necessary to shape society, educate children, and contribute to public life. They believed in the distinct power of womanhood, not in its denial or androgynous dilution. This wave of feminism still upheld marriage, motherhood, and virtue as good and central to a woman's role. At this time, there was no
Yeah, like I said, it started like a pretty, what's the word? People often talk in these spaces like, oh, the weak man gave these women too much power, or when in reality it was a very, what's the word? It was a very reasonable ask. We want access to education. We want legal rights when it comes to inheritance. We want, an out in abusive marriages, of course. At the time, it was a very, very reasonable ask. The society was growing. The industrial revolution had just happened. It's basically like a very reasonable thing to ask. So, people back then, the men, they gave the green flag, and now there's the unintended consequences of political parties and movements taking too much power over time.
cult of the self. Unlike modern feminism that says you do you, early feminists operated under a framework of duty, sacrifice, and service, especially in how women should use their influence. They weren't trying to free women from the family or smash the patriarchy. Their goal was often to improve society by improving the conditions of women within their God-given roles. There was no obsession with liberation from responsibility, but a very deep sense of moral obligation. But then it was hijacked. But again, it wasn't born corrupt. As I'm sure you've heard before, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. There came a point where the first wave of feminism was co-opted by occult forces, and this occurred in the early 20th century. Theosophy, goddess worship, and spiritual rebellion started to creep in. Names like Helena Blavatsky and Alice Bailey replaced the moral language of justice with esoteric visions of power. Margaret Sanger, who championed birth control, was very much influenced by these occult ideas. What began as a call for fairness became a seedbed.
Go read Rachel Wilson's book, guys. She goes so much into depth about this occult feminist. Like, it's insane. Like, right now we have this women have always had this, I guess, delusion that they have like a spiritual connection with whatever the chakras and the astrology and good vibes or whatever. The thing is that, men and women see the world extremely differently. There was a movement back in the 2000s. the secret or something like that. So basically, women said, "All right, we envision something, and then the world gives it to you." But the thing is, it's if you're an attractive woman, there's so many people and men willing to give you opportunities that otherwise you wouldn't have. Like we have like such different perspectives on what it means to want something and to envision something and getting something that there's no way they can understand what a man struggles when it comes to achieving something, right? If you're like a regular dude and you want, I don't know, you want a car, like you have to make so many sacrifices in order to get there, to be able to purchase a new car or whatever it is you want. And for a woman, if she's attractive enough, she just finds some guy who has made it and they basically give them whatever they want, and they think that the universe, there's like this magical ephemeral thing that is actually making her life better, when actually its her whole perception is warped by the attractiveness and the positive outlook of people, because she's so attractive. People treat her so nicely, and they give her so much attention and time and money sometimes, that she thinks it is like like something out there that is basically propping this whole thing, when in reality it's she doesn't understand what it is to earn something.
For revolt. And this brings us to the second wave, otherwise known as the Great Inversion. If the first wave sought integration, the second wave demanded demolition. It no longer wanted to refine society. It wanted to reimagine it. The family, gender roles, Christianity, and the very essence of womanhood. You were told that you were more than just a mother. You were told you needed to be free, that love was a trap, that your womb was a burden, that the home was a cage, and the man beside you was your oppressor. But what if I told you these ideas didn't come from nowhere? That they were planted, seeded, and sold, spun by women who themselves were serving a much bigger agenda. Let's take a look at 3 women whose ideas specifically shaped the modern version of womanhood, and ask the question that no one seems to ever ask: what did their version of freedom actually cost us? Betty Friedan lit the match. In her best-selling book, The Feminine Mystique, she calls the suburban housewife's role a comfortable concentration camp. She said that domestic life was a very slow
Guys, look at her. I mean, Jesus. I mean, I feel bad for the lady, right? But she wasn't envy between people. It's so huge, and she wasn't gifted with good looks. Look at her. I mean, that's the whole thing. Like, basically, the problem with really, really smart, isolated people is that they go down a very, very, very dark path. Like, I'm sure this lady was brilliant, and she looks brilliant. And I've read some of her stuff. She's pretty a good writer. But the thing is, you need when someone's so smart, you need someone to check you on your delusions, because you can basically, if you're smart enough, you can convince yourself of anything. And if you're really, really smart, you can convince less smart people about some delusional ideas. And this is basically what happens in almost every movement, right? The visionaries come, they come for justice, and then the people who are smarter, who are a bit more cynical, who are more, I guess, they have like a more dark mindset. They come in and then they destroy the whole movement, and then you have like reformist, and then it's like a cycle. Like some people come and build, some people come and destruct, build and destruct, and that's why these freaking movements like the feminism movement, the LGBT movement, it goes up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down, and it's just a wheel. That's why we have like huge political swings. Sometimes the Democrats come in, then they have really bad ideas, really cynical ideas, really dark ideas, and then the Republicans rise up. It's like a whole system of basically. I personally think it's because of the communication ease, because now everyone can communicate, and when an idea gets big enough and it basically becomes stale over time, so they need to revitalize it, and you just create these freaking cycles of up and down, left, right. It's just an insane way to live.
death, that motherhood was an intellectual prison, and that women didn't even realize how miserable they were. So women left the home, not always because they wanted to, but because they were told that they're wasting their potential. Friedan redefined value as visibility. Fulfillment became synonymous with professional status. Homemaking, once revered, was now reframed as shameful. So she offered a new purpose, careerism. She told women to leave the kitchen and enter the boardroom. And again, not because they all wanted to, but because supposedly by staying at home, they were just wasting away. And many women who followed this pathway are now stuck asking themselves, why do I have a resume full of achievements, but feel like something more sacred is missing? Or they resent the men in their lives for the fact that they feel the burden of trying to be everything, yet feeling almost.
That's the thing that feminists don't get. Like, we men at work, most of us, like 98% of us, we don't want to work. We have to work. It's not like a pleasure. Even if you're like doing manual labor, right? It's probably better than sitting, not for your body but for your mind. It's I used to work on metal, like a metal shop, and we work like 10 hours straight, very physical, grinding metal, cutting, whatever. And then I moved to like a more upper levels office job, doing like social media stuff. And it's so much draining to work for a corporation, filling out papers, just looking at a screen, pretending to work at times. It's so much. It's so much draining to yourself, to your mental health, to your soul, that it's why women couldn't women don't understand, or didn't understand at the time, I guess, the awful thing it is to have to work at an office place where there's so little impact that you're doing.
Nothing. But Gloria Steinem took it even further. She told women that true power came from detachment, emotional, sexual, and spiritual. Marriage, optional. Children, inconvenient. Abortion, empowerment. And men, oppressors. She famously said that a woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle. And what's never discussed is her work in the CIA, or with the CIA, spending her time shaping youth movements and influencing the overall culture. And this is not a conspiracy. Okay, she admitted this.
See, I think, I'm a big fan of this whole CIA thing, and the whole conspiracy theories and all. They're fun, but I think people overplay the power that the CIA has. Like, they have so many assets. They have so many, I guess, recruitment, normal people, agents, that, usually they go for like intellectual people, the CIA specifically. But I don't think there's too many nefarious things going on. There are, of course, there are, but not as many as people think. And I don't know. That's just my take.
Gloria, at the festival, you worked for the Independent Research Service.
Okay.
Well, exactly when did your own association with the CIA start, and in what fashion? Did they come to you, or did you go to them?
In 1958, when I came home from India, I discussed with student leaders, past and present, many of them active with the National Student Association.
She didn't liberate women, she redirected them out of the home and into the system. And not towards joy, but towards isolation disguised as independence. And then came Firestone, who indeed took an aim at biology itself, in the dialectic of sex. She declared that pregnancy, barbaric, and the family unit, a form of tyranny. Her vision, ultimately, was quite chilling. Reproduction without women, families without fathers, and bodies without boundaries. Firestone had no goals of equality. She wanted to erase womanhood entirely, to remove pregnancy from the body, to completely abolish the nuclear family, to replace biology with technology. She believed that the only way to be free was to completely escape the female form in itself. And unfortunately, it worked. These ideas fractured women from their own biology. Motherhood was no longer sacred, sexual restraint or boundaries was seen as a weakness, virtue became oppression, and the feminine became a costume. If you were told that pain meant depression, that childbirth was chains, that nurturing or being nurturing is so outdated, you were absorbing Firestone's gospel. I hope by now you can start to see how second wave feminism fused cultural Marxism with spiritual rebellion. It glamorized the self and diminished responsibility. Feminist text praised witchcraft, sexual liberation as empowerment, abortion as a right instead of a moral tragedy, pornography, hookup culture, and promiscuity as markers of freedom. Not even disclosing that the things that women did not want to be valued for, or degraded down into, was indeed the value that now women had to lead with. Steinem herself endorsed feminist occultism. What began as a movement for equality had become a full-blown ideological inversion. This was and is a deliberate psychological operation to destroy modesty, shame, and sexual restraint, especially in young women. By encouraging women to divorce, work, and raise children independently, second wave feminism replaced the husband with the state, government welfare programs, state-run schools, legal and financial systems.
That is so true, guys. And the worst thing is that the government doesn't produce any money at all. So basically, we're borrowing from future generations, and we're bloating this whole freaking society with fugazi money. And there's no plan to make any changes. Like, the thing is, the moment we went off the gold standard, right, your money became very ephemeral. the economic incentives switched from hard assets like like gold to like the production, the productivity of your people, of your country. That's why we are working and working and working and working and getting paying so much in taxes and getting very little in return because they have so much money wasting overseas, bloated with the next generation, trying to pay off the debts. That basically is like almost like becoming like a second rate slave again. And this is how, you know, people don't suffer for their choices immediately anymore, right? Back then, if a mom had a child outside of wedlock, like she was so screwed. Like basically, she would probably either move back with her parents and basically starve or nearly starve to death. And now, basically, the government just, prints money, gives you food stamps, helps with the rent, and basically just, low hand, they ask for a vote, blue, Democrat most likely. And there's no, the government gives you no incentive to make immediate changes. And this is where the whole thing probably exponentially exploded, and the whole degeneracy of women and society as a whole just started going downhill very fast.
Systems that incentivized single motherhood and positioned interdependence on the covenant of marriage as a mistake. And what so many women do not see is that this aligns with globalist interests, not individual fulfillment. Break the family, increase state dependency. And this brings us to part 3, the third wave of feminism. And this is where womanhood started to completely disappear. When truth becomes relative, womanhood becomes undefinable. Rachel Wilson. Third wave feminism didn't just distort womanhood, it dismantled it. No longer is it united around the female experience. It divided itself into identities, grievances, and contradictions. Intersectionality began as a valid critique, but it evolved into this hierarchy of oppression, where being a woman was no longer enough. Instead of seeking unity amongst women, feminism began fracturing into subcategories. You needed to be queer, a person of color, disabled, or non-binary in order to claim moral authority, and biology was soon set out to be erased. Judith Butler's queer theory said that gender is performative, not reality. Soon being a woman was a feeling, something that...
See, and does this once you go into the relatively black hole, like there's no going back. Like you're going to degrade and degrade and degrade and degrade, and you have this whole, I can't say anything because of YouTube, but you know what I'm talking about. This crazy, crazy things with the LGBT stuff. Like once you take the leap into the everything is relative, you go to a very dark, dark path, really bad, really soon.
Anybody could claim. Women's spaces, sports, and even safety were sacrificed at the altar of inclusion. So feminism became competitive and tribal, with victimhood becoming the new form of moral authority. The more oppressed categories a person could claim, the more power they held in the movement itself. And this newfound focal point within the movement moved feminism away from a universal definition of womanhood, and instead created a fractured identity matrix, where being a biological female was no longer the uniting thread. It also encouraged resentment, envy, and perpetual grievance, not cooperation, not uplifting. And as a consequence, feminism began to devour its own. If you did not affirm the ideology, you were labeled a turf, a bigot, a relic. The category woman became so fluid that anyone could claim it, even biological men. This meant that women's rights, ironically, no longer had a subject. You could not advocate for female-specific issues without being accused of exclusion. And this was the final inversion. Third-wave feminism sided with a worldview that denied objective truth. And in doing so, it sacrificed the very people it claimed to protect, biological women, who are now being erased, displaced, and completely gaslit in the name of inclusion. But it goes even deeper than just that. At the same time, victimhood became virtue. The more identities one could claim, the more power that they held. Words were redefined as violence, no longer judged by intent or truth, but by the emotional response that they triggered. Safe spaces, which were once intended...
Right now, it's 2025, and it's pretty bad. But if you go back to 2018, 2016, 2017, it was even worse. Like I think we're probably like 60 or 70% of the craziness that we had back a couple of years, maybe like oh god, it's been a decade almost. So basically, the whole oppression thing came from basically universities, guys. Like basically, I think it's the same incentive. People in universities get paid by the government. They don't really live in the actual real world, so they can go off in their mind to these crazy freaking ideas. They don't take into account human nature, and once those ideas clash with the real world, that's when we have like so many conflicts. If you remember, there were so many protests. People were beating each other up in the streets. It's just chaos because these two categories of people, right? The intellectuals at universities who come up with some crazy ideas, and the regular Joes who live in the real life, and basically they basically go so far into their own individual I guess, not realities, but their delusions that when they clash with the real world and they try to impose their delusions in the real world, they basically destroy businesses, they destroy relationships, they destroy even education. Like, if you're getting like a degree, if you're going to college with and you're trying to get a degree in medicine or anything like that, yeah, go for it. But anything else, guys, you're wasting so much money.
Intended to protect healing became these ideological bubbles where dissent was dangerous and curiosity was condemned. Campuses that once encouraged inquiry now have trained their students to catastrophize discomfort, to view any challenge or being called out on poor behavior as traumatic, and to believe that emotional safety should override open dialogue. And this created a generation that is allergic to confrontation, communication, or alternative perspectives, incapable of a healthy debate, and completely conditioned to collapse under any form of responsibility or pressure. Instead of empowering women, third-wave feminism bred fragility. It exalted hypersensitivity, rewarded grievances, and suppressed resilience. Women were taught that discomfort was danger, that any disagreement, specifically from a man, was harm, and that silence was preferable to the risk of offense. And this carried on as cancel culture replaced growth. Forgiveness was no longer the goal. Shame became a form of currency, and redemption was no longer possible. Even feminists who
That's the thing about these leftists. Like, they have no concept of forgiveness or mercy. They are so freaking vicious, and they hide themselves in these cloaks of victimhood. Like, you have no idea. If you have ever met like a college student who was like a super lefty guy, and you contradicted them in some sort of way, fundamentally, they turn like this super fake laugh, smiling people. They go vicious. Like, they attack your reputation. They do crazy stuff. These people are not good. They're not nice people. They're vicious, vicious, weak people trying to make their delusions a reality. Guys, like, honestly, I think this whole generation is screwed. Gen Z, Gen Alpha. That's why I think if you want to live a better life, a better love, like a real connection, like a real marriage, love, whatever it is, you have to go overseas. That's why we created this whole movement with Nomadic Kingdom. Like, there is no incentive for you to stay. One, because it's economics. Like, you cannot afford to live here anymore if you have like a regular salary. That's why, if you can learn skills that won't be probably taken over by AI, and you can make money remotely either through your own personal brand, your own business, or freelancing your skills, and you can make $3,000, $4,000. That's more than enough to live like a super, super comfortable life in dozens and maybe even hundreds of cities out there. And that's why we have Nomadic Kingdom. And if you want to go check out some guides, some resources we have, we will link everything down below. And thank you for your time.